What's up, Daveeezy? We are back with another video. We are back with another video of Donald Trump on his damn trial and shit, man. Prosecutors accuse Trump of criminal conspiracy in opening statements. What the fuck? Let's go. Let me just click. What the fuck is going on?
And welcome back to CNN Special Live coverage right now. Opening statements are just starting in the hush money trial of Donald J. Trump. CNN's Paula Reed is collecting all the updates from the CNN team inside the courthouse. You'll see them on the left-hand side of your screen. Run us through what's happening, Paula.
All right, opening statements just got underway a moment ago. The first quote that we have is the prosecution laying out its theory of the case, which is, quote, "This case is about a criminal conspiracy and a cover-up. The defendant, Donald Trump, orchestrated a criminal scheme to corrupt the 2016 presidential election. Then he covered up that criminal conspiracy by lying in his New York business records over and over and over again." So here they are reframing this, because usually people refer to this as the hush money case, where yes, hush money was paid to Stormy Daniels for her to stay quiet about an affair that she had with then candidate Trump. But having an affair is not a crime. Paying hush money is not a crime. The criminal allegation here is that the former president falsified business records in order to cover up that he had to pay this money.
Well, and what they are starting with, Matthew Colangelo, this is going to become a name that will become very familiar to people. He's the prosecutor that Paul just noted that is making these opening statements and starting them. They are going to lay out the entire timeline of this. And what he just started with is something that's really key, which is a meeting that happened in August 2015 that we didn't know about in real time, but we later learned once Trump was in the White House that it was Donald Trump, Michael Cohen, and David Pecker. They were all there in that meeting, and that's when David Pecker was essentially asking how he could be helpful to Donald Trump's presidential campaign. And of course, now we know the saga that it has become, these three stories that are at the center of this hush money case and at the heart of what they are alleging about these payments. But that is what they are going back to. And at that meeting, we didn't initially know that Donald Trump was the third person in that room. And obviously, that's incredibly consequential, because if David Pecker is in fact the first testimony that the prosecution calls after these opening statements, he can talk about Donald Trump's knowledge of this agreement and whether or not he signed off on it and what he said directly.
He could say, in fact, yes, we talked about this being in order to help him in the election.
Exactly. And if he says that is it, he could back up Michael Cohen's statements. So that's important, because we've talked about Michael Cohen's issue as a witness and how they will rely on him having someone back that up. And so the fact that prosecutors are starting off with this is their main is their opening statement just shows that they are saying this all goes back to that meeting where Donald Trump himself was in that meeting. Because really what they have to do at the end of the day here is convince these 12 jurors that Donald Trump was directly involved and essentially had signed off on this.
Yeah.
And we're learning that Trump is sitting back in his chair and not even looking at the prosecutor as he speaks. And the prosecutor, as part of this opening statement, they're reframing this, again, not just as a paperwork crime, right, an effort to cover up this hush money payment by falsifying business records, but an effort to interfere in the 2016 election. And that's key, because that is why this is being charged as a felony. Even though he's not charged with federal election interference, that's what they're arguing here, that these business records were falsified in an effort to interfere with the 2016 election. The prosecutor said, quote, "They formed a conspiracy at that meeting to influence the presidential election by concealing negative information about Mr. Trump in order to help him get elected." And that is the crux of their argument, that this was all done to help Trump in the 2016 election. In fact, they reprimand me sometimes when I call it the hush money case on air. They say, "No, Paula, it is the 2016 election interference case."
It is important to point out that they say the conspiracy was hatched in this meeting. Of the three people in this meeting, the prosecution has two people who will be testifying, Michael Cohen and David Pecker. They have two of the three people in that meeting testify.
They also have documents, and documents where Alan Weisselberg, the former CEO of the Trump Organization, took notes. The question, though, and what Trump's team, when they get their chance to make their opening statement, will almost certainly rebut, is the idea of Trump's direct involvement, where they will say, Michael Cohen made this decision. Michael Cohen is the one who actually paid Stormy Daniels this $130,000. That was Michael Cohen's decision. And just because other people were having these conversations doesn't mean that Donald Trump had signed off on it. We'll see what the jurors will believe. We'll see what the evidence shows. And it's also, remember, there's that recording that Michael Cohen took where he and Donald Trump were discussing David Pecker and how to set up a company to reimburse him and what that was going to look like for the other damaging stories.
You get more updates?
Yeah, we're watching the updates. So they're talking about the payments to Cohen, because that's where the crux of this case lies. The evidence that the judge was talking about earlier, the paperwork trail, which for Trump is so unusual, because one thing he's really good at is not leaving a paper trail. But they're talking about how Michael Cohen, who paid that $130,000 to Stormy Daniels, how he was reimbursed, and why the paper trail there, that lays the foundation for these criminal allegations. They say that Trump reimbursed Cohen after he made that $130,000 payment, but disguised what the reimbursement was for. They said they disguised what the payments were for. The defendant said in business records that he was paying Cohen for legal services pursuant to a retainer agreement, but those were lies. There was no retainer agreement. And now I can tell you from talking to sources on the Trump team, they will argue that at this time, Cohen was working as a lawyer for Trump. He was doing legal work. That is something that they are going to argue when they have their chance to defend their client.
And just to note, what's going to be so fascinating is how Trump responds during these opening statements as he's listening to all of this, because he was just posting this morning on Truth Social on his way to the courthouse that it was just legal fees, and he was essentially asking, how can I be indicted because I paid an attorney legal fees? He did just pass Todd Blanche a note as the prosecution is making their opening statement. And I will say, despite what people were saying at the time, Rudy Giuliani is on television in an interview with Fox News during that time saying Michael Cohen wasn't doing any legal work for Donald Trump. That's when he was trying to downplay the fact that Trump had reimbursed him.
Yeah. Jake, let's go back to you.
All right, Anderson, thank you so much. We have lots of updates coming in from the courtroom right now. The prosecution, Assistant District Attorney Matthew Colangelo, as you've heard from Paula Reed, has been introducing the case before the jury in his opening argument, saying that the conspiracy extended to payments that Stormy Daniels received just weeks before.
Hey, you! Stop what you're watching right now. If you drive your car less than 100 miles a day.
Before the 2016 election, the Trump, quote, was paying Michael Cohen back for an illegal payment to Stormy Daniels on the eve of the election. That, quote, Cohen made that payment at the defendant, Donald Trump's direction, and he did it to influence the presidential election. This is the prosecution's allegation. And he did it, Donald Trump did it, according to the assistant. Trump reimbursed Cohen for that payment, and they, quote, disguised what the payments were for. Quote, they disguised what the payments are for. The defendant said in business records that he was paying Cohen for legal services pursuant to a retainer agreement, but those were lies. This is, again, what the assistant district attorney is alleging about Mr. Trump. There was no retained agreement. The payment to Cohen were lies, and the defendant was being paid back for illegal payments. Laura Coates, this is what we expected the prosecution to bring up.
They did, and they had to do this. And I'm going to go through kind of an argument checklist. You just listed out that there are 34 business records counts. Let me look here for a second here. They have to prove that there is an intent to defraud. They have to prove that there is an intent to commit another crime. But the really important part here is this one. You're mentioning it just now. It's this one about made and caused a false entry in the business records. Why is that important? Because that's the idea that said this was not a legal service, actual thing happening. It was an illegal retainer, in fact, a non-existent one. You heard them actually say this, in fact, was all lies. Why this is important?
Let me just jump in for 1 second to bring in the courtroom updates, which is the prosecution, the assistant district attorney, Matthew Colangelo, just said that this whole scheme that you're talking about started, quote, with that August 2015 meeting in Trump Tower. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Right, and this idea of being all a lie and having to try to prove it, they actually have to do that, though. They can't just say it right now. They have to actually prove their case. And how they do that is the actual documents. Having them show that there were actual documents. That comes from the likes of David Pecker, maybe talking about what they've done in the past. It comes from maybe Ellen Weisselberg going on to tell you about what checks were actually cashed and why they were not. But one big important part here is going to be this, the private versus political. Ellie alluded to this earlier today as well. Whether this was all trying to stop his wife or embarrassment from understanding about the private or the political aspect of it. If it's actually maybe even half private, half political, doesn't matter.
And so look at what the prosecutor is saying right here on the left side of your screen. You can see the prosecutor, Matthew Colangelo, is saying that this meeting, August 2015, Trump and Cohen, Michael Cohen, his attorney, and David Pecker, the publisher of the National Enquirer and other tabloids, agreed at the Trump Tower meeting that Pecker, quote, would help the defendant's campaign, that's the quote, by acting as the, quote, eyes and ears of the campaign. So here they are making a direct allegation that this is political, not personal.
And if that's the case, they can kind of check that off their list in terms of what they have to prove, all coming back to this idea of the intent to defraud, the intent to commit the other crime. Obviously, adultery, not a crime, but trying to not be transparent in an election is. They've got a lot to prove, but these statements get them off to the right start.
Now they're about to obviously go into more details. The prosecutor tells the jury the scheme was three-pronged. One of those obviously was what we were just discussing, which is the prism through which the prosecutors are making their opening statement to the jury is about his campaign, is about the fact that he wasn't just doing this allegedly to protect his private life, to protect his wife. He was doing it to protect his own ability to be president of the United States.
Ooh wee, this is getting spicy, bro. This is getting so spicy, bro. This is getting so spicy, y'all. I don't even know what to say right now, man. I can't wait to see what happens, bro. It's a lot. They gotta prove that it's a lot of proving they had to do in this case for Trump, man. But I ain't gonna hold y'all too long, man. We got more videos to upload today. You know what I'm saying? So we're gonna check back and see what happens. And yeah, man. I don't wish nobody go to jail, bro. You know what I'm saying? But whatever's right is right. If you deserve it, deserve. If you don't, you don't. That's all I gotta say, y'all. But if you like the video, If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit the notification bell so you get notified when I upload, y'all. I love y'all. Peace and love, baby. And we out.